Welcome to Dialogue. We're continuing our series looking at documented examples of dirty politics, really the mechanisms of influence that are working just under the surface of public debate.
And this is case 14. It feels like a capstone to the series because it gets at a really fundamental question. What happens when tactics that we used to think of as foreign interference get adopted, domesticated, and even legalized?
That's the whole mission of this deep dive, domestic information warfare. When most of us picture influence ops, we still think of that caricature.
Right, the foreign hostile actor. You imagine some remote servers, a bot network, thousands of fake accounts just flooding the zone with noise.
Exactly. And that image was largely built around entities like the Internet Research Agency, the IRA. They really showed the world what global-scale automated influence could look like.
Fake identities, targeted engagement bombing, just high-volume disinformation.
And because it was foreign, it was so overtly hostile, constantly breaking platform rules, it gave the platforms a really clear path.
It was simple. Expose the operation, ban the accounts, and then, declare victory.
But that initial, very visible phase, it led to a huge misunderstanding. The big takeaway for a lot of people was we won the war on disinformation, we shut down the troll farms.
When in reality, the influence never stopped.
It just evolved. The core thesis here, really, is that the modern version of this problem isn't about bots anymore. It's not about fake accounts or some kind of secretive deception.
The techniques just grew up, they matured, and they became part of the system itself.
So if the IRA was the messy, chaotic beta test,
then this case is about the polished, commercially viable final product. It's about what happens when information control gets embedded into administrative processes and, well, it just doesn't need deception to work anymore.
Let's start by looking at the Achilles heel of those classic foreign operations. Whether we're talking about the IRA or, similar state-sponsored actors, they all had this fundamental operational weakness.
They had to break the rules.
They had to break the rules. They were constantly running into trouble with the platform's terms of service.
Right. They needed burner accounts. They had to hide their funding, use VPNs and proxies to hide where they were. They were forced to operate in the shadows.
Which made them brittle. That whole need to break the rules made them vulnerable. Security researchers could find them. Platforms could take them down.
And it gave the platforms a very clear, morally uncomplicated enemy to fight. The fraudulent foreign rule breaker.
So how did this new domestic model solve that problem?
By not breaking any rules at all.
Exactly. The domestic model operates completely inside the existing legal and corporate frameworks. Think of it like a tech company trying to get a policy passed in D.C. They don't illegally hack the lobbying firm.
No, they hire the ex-regulator who wrote the original regulations. They work with the grain of the system, not against it.
And that is a huge structural distinction. The new normal for influence doesn't require any of the classic things we associate with spycraft.
You don't need fake identities.
Because your partners are legitimate institutions.
You don't need covert funding.
Because the partnerships are often public or they're supported by these huge, well-known grant organizations.
And you don't even need deniability.
Quite the opposite, actually. The key is public justification. The actions they take are always publicly justified under these big banners of safety or integrity or protecting elections.
So the influence mechanism itself just becomes administration.
Precisely. If the IRA's goal was plausible deniability, this new model seeks maximum accountability. But it's accountability for doing the right thing.
And we saw this play out after 2017, 2018. The global platforms did these massive cleanups, but the actual function managing public narratives, it didn't just vanish.
No, it professionalized. It transitioned. It started to rely on official partnerships, published best practices, operational frameworks, and these guidelines developed in collaborative settings.
So the influence isn't an attack anymore. It's a feature that's just baked right into the operating system.
I kind of picture the foreign ops as hackers trying to brute force a password, just trying again and again.
While the domestic system is the internal IT department, setting the group policy that decides what software you can even run in the first place.
That's a perfect analogy. It's control through governance, through bureaucratic friction. And that strategic shift is what makes it so incredibly hard to challenge.
Of course. It's always harder to fight an official policy guideline, some flowchart made by experts, than it is to fight a hidden server farm in the middle of nowhere.
The old model was guerrilla warfare. This new model is infrastructure development, and it's all backed by consensus. This durability based on these shared frameworks for safety, That's the key innovation we really need to break down.
Okay, so that durability rests on a very specific architecture that was built post-2016.
Right, and this structure was designed explicitly to manage information flow domestically, especially during, let's say, high-stakes political moments. It's not centralized.
No, it's a highly distributed network of different actors, and that decentralization is its greatest strength.
It sounds less like a single agency and more like a carefully constructed supply chain for managing information. So what are the key components here?
Well, the analysis breaks it down into 5 main components that are in continuous cooperation. This is where you really see the depth of the mechanism.
First up, you have the government agencies. Now, these aren't always visible to the public, but they are crucial. They're the pipeline. They provide the initial classified or official threat intelligence.
So they're setting the initial warning level. They provide that authoritative context.
They're basically defining what risk looks like from a national security point of view. Next, you have election security task forces. These often act as the critical bridge builders. They're linking the formal, sometimes slow government agencies with the really high-speed operational teams at the tech platforms
So they're organizing the weekly intelligence calls, standardizing how everyone talks to each other.
and making sure that government intelligence can actually be translated into platform policy.
This is where the rubber meets the road then, between the intel and the implementation. And the third component, of course, is the implementing arm.
The platform trust and safety teams, these are the action takers. They get the intelligence, they get the policy frameworks, and they turn them into moderation decisions. They're the ones with the actual power to label, downrank, or remove the content.
But their decisions are based on inputs from the other 4 actors, which makes everything they do externally defensible.
Exactly. And that brings us to the fourth component, the validation layer. This is where the legitimacy for the entire system comes from.
And that would be
The academic and NGO experts. They're the definitional and research arm. They provide the studies, the definitions of harm, the taxonomies for misinformation,
the models for identifying what high-risk content even looks like.
and their neutrality, or at least their perceived neutrality, gives the whole operation this veneer of nonpartisan academic rigor.
So if the government provides the what, the NGOs provide the why, and the platforms provide the how.
You've got it. And finally, the fifth piece of the puzzle is the private contractors. These are often firms that specialize in rapid data analysis or AI-driven threat detection.
Or just outsourced moderation at scale.
Right. They handle the functions that are either too legally sensitive or just too labor-intensive for the platforms to manage in-house. It provides a really essential layer of separation and scale.
And that structural distribution, that's really the key to its longevity. If you try to argue that this is some centralized conspiracy, you fail immediately because no single entity actually controls the whole thing.
And that is the dirty politics lesson right there. Power lasts a lot longer when it's decentralized and distributed.
So if the government gets criticized for censorship,
They just point to the independent academic definitions being used by the NGOs.
and if the platforms get criticized,
They point to the official threat intelligence that was provided by the government. It's a masterful distribution of accountability.
it is. It forces you to fight 5 different entities operating under 50 different charters and legal protections. You can't attack one single point and take it down.
It makes the system anti-fragile. It doesn't rely on trust. It just relies on self-interest and a very defensible process.
So we have this really robust distributed structure, but the crucial question is, how does it actually translate into managing content on the ground? It's pretty clear it's not about big announced bans.
No, it operates through preemption. And preemption is the quiet operational shift that makes this model so different.
Foreign ops were loud. They were high volume. They were aggressive in seeking virality.
Whereas the domestic system, it aims for silence.
Yeah.
It manages content before it can achieve scale or become politically volatile, rather than trying to punish it after the fact.
Which, crucially, means that most users don't even realize moderation is happening until long after their content has already been kneecapped. They don't get a notification saying your post was deemed unacceptable.
No, they just experience the effects, not the announcement. So we should probably detail the specific actions that are taken, which the analysis really lays out as the core method of operation.
Let's do it.
First, content gets labeled. This is the introduction of an official caution or a warning tag. Even before you click on something, its credibility is instantly damaged by the platform's official stamp.
It's a speed bump in the user experience.
Exactly. Next, and this one is far more insidious, is downranking. This is really the core of preemption.
Downranking is basically the algorithmic equivalent of censorship.
It is. The content might still technically exist on a server somewhere, but it's suppressed in every feed, every ranking model. It's removed from the For You pages, the trending lists, the main search results.
Your content is put on life support. It's only visible if someone specifically searches for your exact profile and then scrolls way back in time to find it.
I like to think of it as a digital version of being put in timeout. You're not kicked out of the party, but you're stuck in the corner where no one can find you or hear you.
That's a great way to put it. It just tanks the visibility score. And in the algorithmic world, distribution is existence. If content is invisible, it might as well not exist for most people.
Then third, content is contextualized. This doesn't remove the information, it manages the interpretation of that information.
So the platform will attach official links or counter-narratives or articles from preferred sources right underneath the original post, framing it as misleading or incomplete.
Right, and this moves the goalposts. It forces the user to accept the official narrative right alongside the one they were originally looking at, making the original content way harder to defend or promote.
Because now you have to argue against an institutional link.
Exactly. Fourth, content is flagged. This is more of an internal tracking mechanism, often invisible to the public. But once it's flagged by a trusted partner or an internal AI, that content gets a low score that triggers all these automated processes.
Limiting monetization or further distribution, even if it hasn't technically violated a specific rule yet.
Precisely. And the final action targets the platform's single most powerful tool, its ability to just manufacture virality.
Content is removed from recommendation loops.
This is the nuclear option of preemption. Virality today, it's not spontaneous. It's engineered by the suggested for your engine. By blocking content from those loops, you guarantee it cannot achieve exponential scale.
It's guaranteed to die on the vine.
And the combined effect of these 5 actions, it leads to this very specific, very confusing feeling for the user. Topics that were hot yesterday suddenly get quieter. Accounts that were loud go cold.
And conversations just start feeling risky. The specter of reduced reach hangs over every single post you make.
It's the ultimate psychological operation, and it's conducted through engineering design. If we use your radio analogy, it's not the station getting abruptly silenced by a regulator's hammer.
No, it's that slow fade. You keep tuning in, but the signal just gets weaker and weaker. It's filled with more static until you start doubting your own receiver.
You start to wonder, did I say something wrong? Is my phone broken? Am I just bad at this platform?
The system makes the user blame themselves. It makes you internalize the idea that you're failing to reach an audience because your content isn't good enough, instead of realizing the platform's architecture is actively throttling your reach based on these administrative decisions.
That reduction of visibility and that increased friction. It achieves total control without ever having to announce a ban.
And the political resilience of this whole system, it seems to rest on its ability to innovate legitimacy.
It does. As we said, troll farms relied on fake identities, on being hostile. This model requires the unwavering trust of users and the public.
And this happened because platforms learned a really hard lesson. Acting alone on politically charged content was a guaranteed way to get accused of bias and censorship.
To survive, they needed external validation for every single controversial moderation decision they made. They needed cover.
So the platform's action has to look like it's just implementing the guidance of some neutral authority, not making an arbitrary editorial choice.
Exactly. And the systems rely on several key inputs to build that authoritative shield. First, they rely on authoritative sources. These are your major public health organizations, official government election sites, established news outlets.
The first check mark of institutional trust.
Then you have the trusted flaggers. These are vetted individuals, maybe from NGOs or research groups, who are given priority status in reporting content.
Their flag just skips the regular user queue and goes straight to a moderation team or even an automated action.
Yes, and then they also formalize this reliance on government briefings and NGO advisories. These inputs help establish the threat landscape. They define what narratives are currently considered high risk or potentially dangerous.
So when a moderation action happens, the platform doesn't say, "We decided this." They say, "We're following expert guidance from the dozen independent organizations we partner with based on intelligence that was briefed to us by the task force."
And it's a strategically brilliant approach. Authority scales so much better than force.
If the platform tries to impose a narrative, it sparks outrage.
But if the platform is merely implementing the recommendations of a dozen credentialed organizations, doctors, professors, researchers, the resistance gets diffused. It moves away from the platform and toward the experts, who are generally way more insulated from public accountability.
This gets us to the idea of the invisible handshake, the mechanics of how consensus is created that binds this whole network together. It's a self-reinforcing echo chamber.
And this specific detail is maybe the most compelling part of the analysis. You have this phenomenon where dozens of organizations, all drawing from a similar pool of large institutional grants or philanthropic funding, are citing each other's research as validation.
The analysis notes, with a bit of dark humor, that nothing says independent moderation, like 12 organizations, funded by the same 3 grants, all citing each other as neutral validators to prove that a consensus exists.
It's not a secret cabal meeting in a basement. It's the grant cycle and professional self-interest in action.
These organizations are incentivized to define risk in similar ways, to use the same language, to produce findings that support the current policy framework.
Which makes it effortless for the platforms to then claim a broad, nonpartisan consensus.
And this is so critical for understanding why looking for a conspiracy misses the point. There's no single master plan dictating speech from the top down.
That expectation of a central coordinator, that's a holdover from the old, brittle model of influence.
So the lack of central coordination is actually the point of the new system.
Precisely. Every actor in the chain, the NGO analyst, the platform trust officer, the government liaison, is making decisions that are individually rational and defensible. They're coordinating to manage risk.
Minimizing their own legal liability, protecting brand safety for advertisers, maximizing their institutional reputation.
And when incentives align that perfectly across multiple sectors, everyone wanting stability, safety, minimal controversy coordination becomes totally unnecessary.
The system just runs itself. And the result is a managed public discourse, achieved as a byproduct of all these shared, rational, self-interested decisions. And that's the genius of it.
Let's shift to the algorithms, because they're the technical engine that's actually executing this preemption strategy. It's easy to assign some kind of moral judgment to an algorithm, but the analysis suggests they're really just hyper-efficient tools optimizing for specific corporate goals.
That is the essential insight. Algorithms are mathematical tools, but they absolutely reflect the values and priorities of the people who program them. And post-2016, those priorities shifted dramatically.
Platforms started optimizing heavily for, first, safety and stability of the user environment.
Second, advertiser comfort, keeping content predictable and non-volatile to maintain that ad revenue.
And third, institutional trust.
Yeah.
Appearing responsible and responsive to government warnings, which is crucial if you want to get regulatory relief.
So if an algorithm is told to optimize for institutional trust and safety, then any content that challenges an established institutional narrative, even if it's a totally legitimate controversy, is inherently going to get flagged as creating friction and instability.
It's creating noise.
Yeah.
Noise is bad for stability, and it's terrible for advertisers. So the system doesn't eliminate controversy completely. It shapes it.
Your visibility becomes conditional on how you frame the topic. You can discuss a sensitive subject, but only if you use vetted language, cite pre-approved sources, and stick to the established framing provided by the trusted partners.
Otherwise, you get that digital static we talked about. Control in this model doesn't require total silence. It just requires friction. It makes certain speech difficult or slow or low reach.
And the effort required to overcome that friction is simply not worth the reward for the vast majority of users who are just trying to make a point.
And this engineered friction leads directly to the ultimate goal of the system, the chilling effect. This system successfully conditions users to adapt their own behavior without any formal law or even a conscious awareness that they're being manipulated.
This is where you see the individual psychological consequence. What does that user adaptation actually look like?
Well, the user begins to self-regulate. They start avoiding certain topics that they've noticed in the past, result in a sudden drop in reach or engagement.
They start softening their language, removing the sharp edges, the strong opinions, the inflammatory phrasing, to avoid tripping the algorithmic wires.
They realize the platform rewards cautious, neutral, and institutional-aligned content.
And the most critical step is self-censoring. Users just choose not to post at all, sensing that the public square is hostile to their perspective, or that the cost of participating, the risk of getting throttled, outweighs any reward.
And if they don't withdraw completely, they migrate platforms. They move to smaller, often niche spaces where the friction is lower, which effectively ghettos certain conversations and removes them from the mainstream discourse.
This outcome, the systematic suppression of certain types of speech through environmental conditioning, it has a long documented history.
It does. The analysis points out that this chilling effect is the same result that was achieved in very different historical operations.
Like what?
Well, think about COINTELPRO operations against activist groups in the 60s and 70s. The goal was rarely formal arrest. It was infiltration and management designed to create mistrust and confusion.
Which caused the activists to stop cooperating or just withdraw entirely.
The same chilling effect. Or think about historical astroturf movements, those fake grassroots campaigns. They weren't necessarily designed to convert opinions, but simply to drown out the real voices, creating friction and burnout among genuine participants.
The tools have changed so drastically, from physical surveillance and memos to algorithms and trust and safety guidelines, but the outcome is identical.
The public adapts its behavior to the perceived limits of what is acceptable expression. That systemic, durable control, achieved through the appearance of legitimate administration, that's the core lesson here.
The final distinction we really have to make here is the permanence of this infrastructure. Crises, by their nature, are temporary.
Right, a war ends, an election concludes. But the operational systems, the standing teams, the procedures that are created during that crisis, they almost never disappear.
It's that old political adage, nothing is more permanent than a temporary emergency measure that happens to create a functional bureaucracy.
Absolutely. The measures that were put in place during the high-pressure years after 2016 were often presented as these extraordinary temporary responses, but they became permanent fixtures.
Platforms established standing teams for information integrity with year-round budgets.
Government liaison offices formalized ongoing partnerships with NGOs and tech companies.
And critically, this normalized what was once considered extraordinary. Sharing internal platform data with government agencies, for instance, went from being a debated exceptional measure to just a standard operating procedure.
Which ensures that information flow is perpetually managed. The dirty politics lesson here is crystal clear. Emergency powers resist sunset clauses. Once the system is built and the jobs are created and the infrastructure is budgeted, the incentive is always to find new problems.
New forms of disinformation or risk to justify the continued existence and expansion of the whole structure.
So using this final case 14, we can really synthesize the integration of all the dirty politics tactics we've covered in this series.
This domestic information warfare system is a highly efficient, highly legitimate machine that just incorporates all the lessons of the past.
Exactly. COINTELPRO taught the value of internal management and the chilling effect.
Project Mockingbird taught the power of centralized narrative amplification through respected, legitimate channels.
Think tanks taught the necessity of having academic legitimacy and policy cover.
Troll farms demonstrated how to achieve automated scale.
And the history of surveillance demonstrated the control you can achieve through simple user self-regulation.
This domestic administrative architecture just brought all those elements together into a single, seamless, self-reinforcing framework. It's scalable, and it's politically defensible.
It's not hidden. And because it relies on this defensible bureaucratic consensus, it has incredible staying power.
The foreign operations, like the IRA, they sought to confuse the public, to sow chaos. They wanted to undermine trust in everything.
But the domestic systems learned a more sophisticated form of control. They learned to manage public discourse by guiding it.
And management works not by crudely telling people what to think, which is highly ineffective, but by shaping the underlying reality of communication itself.
They manage what feels safe to say in public. They manage what feels risky to question.
And maybe most powerfully, they manage what quietly, algorithmically disappears from the feeds and from the public consciousness altogether.
The core takeaway from this final deep dive is that modern influence operations didn't try to overtly seize political power through illegal means. They optimized governance through administrative efficiency.
When influence becomes infrastructure, exposure, that occasional discovery of a controversial partnership or a leaked guideline, is just absorbed as another input. It's a data point that proves the system is needed to counter the chaos.
And the system just continues to operate legally and permanently.
It really provides a profound perspective on how control is exercised in the modern era. We hope this entire series has given you a clearer, more detailed understanding of the true mechanics of political influence, whether it's covert or, now, overt and administrative.
Thank you for joining us on this deep exploration.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.